The Monstercat genres are over. So what's next? Well, aside from, well, this creation, I moved on to making skins based on album cover art of Monstercat songs, something I still do to this day. In this video, I'll remake the first 4 of these skins, which are inspired by these songs. Starting off this video, we have the remake for the skin that I made for World by Design. By Design came out during a shift in World's career. When he started out in 2014, he was pretty much entirely future bass, and then moving into 2015, he shifted more towards like indie dance and new disco. You know, stuff like See You and Chase It, and even up into the Awake EP, although he started to branch out a bit more, doing stuff like house and even a bit of R&B. But then in the second half of 2016, he decided to change it up a little bit again and move into drum and bass, and By Design is how he started that out. So By Design, it's a pretty good song. I actually prefer Drift Away, which came out like half a year later. That's the one on the Rocket League album. It's really good. I think it's a bit underrated just because like everyone talked about By Design and they talk about like everything, but then Drift Away kind of lurks a little bit in the shadows because it's not on like a main compilation album, it's just on the Rocket League, so it doesn't get quite as much recognition, but it's really good. By Design is really good too. I don't think it's the greatest song of all time like DC Ranks MC does or anything like that, but I can definitely confirm it is a good song. What you'll notice now when I'm doing this skin and all the other skins in this video is that I go back and forth a little bit on small details in the skin, like maybe a hue or some things on the outer layer. And a lot of the time I'm trying to figure out how much of a balance do I want to strike between making the skin look as faithful, if you will, yeah, as faithful as possible to the old version, or do I want it to maybe look a little off but be more improved by doing that. And you know, sometimes that's a bit of a tough decision to make. It definitely got really tough doing the last skin, probably part of why it took almost 40 minutes to do that one. This one did not take 40 minutes, not even close. It took about 25, so that is pretty quick. Usually skins take like a little over 30 minutes or so. That's like when I'm working non-stop. When I'm making skins that aren't for videos, I usually do it kind of in the background, so it can take me a very long time. Certainly not like 30 minutes or anything. Also, these are remakes, so you know, I don't really need to come up with anything. But I did decide to add in one little extra thing here that wasn't in the original, and that's ripped jeans. Next up, we have the remake of the skin for Blossom by Au5. I actually made skins for both songs on the Blossom EP, which isn't something I usually do. Usually with an EP, I wouldn't do the second song unless it had its own cover art. But in this case, I actually made a skin for both songs, and the reason for that is twofold. The first thing is that I just really personally like the Blossom EP. It's a bit dated now. It did come out in 2013, so you gotta remember that when the fidelity is a little low, or maybe when some things aren't quite at the quality that they were a few years later. But it definitely has its own things going on, and it's pretty good. And the other reason is to do with the cover art itself, and that's that it has a flower on the bottom, and then above that is a moon. So I'm thinking, oh, the flower represents Blossom, and the moon above that represents Moonland. So at that time that made a lot of sense to me, so I decided to make a skin for both of them. Now this skin doesn't look too complicated right now, but I'll tell you, this actually ended up taking me the better part of 40 minutes because of this one little detail that you'll see me add in a little bit just after the belt. You see me doing you see me doing some colors up on the front hair there, and that's just me getting ready to put in the flower crown, which had a couple of different difficulties come up. First of all, there's the issue with figuring out how to get the right colors, because I don't want something that looks way too saturated, because my old style was a bit too saturated, but at the same time I also don't want something looking too grey. So trying to find like the right shades of cyan isn't always the easiest. The other thing though was figuring out what shape I wanted the flowers to be, because the way I do them now is a little different to how I used to do them. So I had to decide here, should I do them the old way or should I do them the new way? Because theoretically I could do it both ways. Other parts of the skin though are same as usual. You know, shading the actual skin on like the legs and the arms and the face is fine. Doing like the inside of the arms next to the torso. I still have no idea what to call that area, but it's like the part that's always easy to shade. And then as for the hair, that was very simple as well, because I didn't even need to worry about the front hair at all, just because the flowers were in the way. So I just had to do the back and the sides and the top, which, you know, is pretty much the same thing every single time. There is one other thing to mention about this skin. You may notice that there's a bit of purple at the front there. It looks a little out of place, but that is actually on the flower, on the cover art. So I decided to include it just to give it a little nod. I know it looks a little out of place, but I thought it would kind of be a cool nod to the cover art. It's absent in the next skin because the moon doesn't have any purple. So only Blossom has purple, not Moonland. As you see here, doing you know, the outer layer on the sleeves, that's pretty simple, you know, just to give it a bit of a folded effect. Then I do the outer layer on the shoes, which is pretty much the same deal every single time. But then, after I finish these eyes, you'll see me once again move on to the flower crown. Well, just after I do these shorts, which I decided to slightly increase the value shift on the bright part of the shorts, just because it looked a bit too dull with it at the usual 5% step. But then, moving on from there, do those inside parts, and then we'll move on to shading the flower crown, which actually turns out to be pretty simple. You know, not too many issues there. Once I kind of had all the details figured out, it all came together pretty quickly. Although you will see I do actually change a few details about this just after the recording, but they're very minor. You'll see what I'm talking about at the end. It's just like the center part of the flower. I removed that from the outer layer. With Blossom out of the way, we can move on to the second song on the Blossom EP, which is Moonland. This skin did not take me anywhere near as long as the last one. There wasn't even really anything that I got held up at. I guess the main kind of, I don't know, kind of stagnation point, if you will, was when I was doing the front hair, when I was trying to figure out what way I wanted that to look, because the hairstyle of the old skin was a bit unusual, so I had to kind of figure out how I wanted to adapt that. Also, you see me adding in the moon there. Even though the dark part is in the corner of that right now, later on I come back to that and change it so that the dark part is over at the side, and you can see when I do that it does look a lot better. This skin uses pretty much the same palette as Blossom, but I do get kind of annoyed when doing this because there were a few colors that I forgot to add to the palette, like the brown that I used for the belt, but that's a very minor thing anyway. So I just get past that, and then doing the hair is very simple. You know, top, back, and sides is pretty much the same deal every single time. Same thing goes for like the inside of the arms. But you will see in a little bit that I kind of messed up a little bit with the skin tone. actually I messed up with this in the skin that I made for Blossom. So I used a shade slightly too dark compared to the original. But like the reality is the difference between those two colors is very small, that it really doesn't mean anything. And also I don't think I've ever used that most pale tone with black hair in a long time. I think it was that one Doomu skin, you know, the girl with the blue hat. I forget what that's called, but I'll put the name of it on the screen so you know what I'm talking about. One other thing in this skin is just figuring out where all the stars go. Again, it's not that difficult, but it's like trying to space them all evenly while also not making it look too regular of a pattern. Can be a little tough, but overall things go very well. And then you'll just see right here I change a few things with the moon, as I previously mentioned, and I just have to reposition a few stars and that's it. So now the fourth and final skin for this video is the remake of the skin for Without You by Protostar. I think when I made the skin originally, I gave it a title that was like a whole line from the song. So it was like, I'll be fine without you. And the reason I did that was that there are quite a few songs on Monstercat called Without You. So I didn't want to cause any kind of difficulty for me down the line with like skin titles if I called this one Without You, but then I wanted to remake the song by Grant, Anevo and Conroe, Without You. Is it pronounced Anevo? 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 I really don't know. Sometimes pronouncing words or names is weird. This skin took me a long time. It actually took me just as long as the skin for Blossom, which is quite surprising when you consider that it doesn't really have the same kind of complicated features as Blossom. But there was a thing going on. You might be able to guess it just from looking at what I have so far. And it's to do with the hair and the shade of red, and basically me thinking it looks a little too harsh, too like in your face, I guess is a good way of describing it. So I end up like changing that a couple of times, and that adds on quite a bit to the duration of making the skin. But doing other parts like the top and doing the shoes and doing the pants, those all take the same amount of time as usual. But like you can see, I've been talking for quite a bit on this yet. I've been talking for quite a bit about this already, and we're not even on to shading the hair yet. So, you know, things can add up sometimes. But now we move on to shading the hair, and doing the actual pattern itself is very simple. I mean, it's the same pattern each time. I do have to do the front hair this time, unlike with Blossom, but it's very simple. I just do like a very simple like vertical shading, so there's no like horizontal pattern going on with that one. But you will see once I get the pattern right, the color looks a bit too orange, so I go and hue shift that back by 15 degrees, I guess? Yeah, I think degrees is the correct term. But then everything looks a bit too pink, so I go back on that and I change it back to the red eyes at. But again, I kind of think to myself, no, that still looks too orange. So I try hue shifting again, but now it looks too pink. So then I'm like, okay, I have to hue shift it by less. So I hue shift it by 5, still looks too red. So then I hue shift it again by another 5 degrees. And then it looks like the correct color. Sort of a plum red, I guess you could describe it. From that perspective, if you saw it next to some other colors, maybe it'd look more pink. But in this case, it still definitely looks like a shade of red. And I think it goes really well with the other stuff, which I'm not sure I'd say the same thing about the original skin. So we finish up the hair. Once the colors are set in place, doing the actual shading, as I already mentioned, is very simple. And now you see me moving on to some stars that I do all over the top like I did for Moonland. Now these stars, they aren't this orange color on the cover art. That's more just like a part of the, I think it's a nebula. But there are stars on the cover art, and I wanted to include that orange somehow because it makes up quite a significant portion of the cover art. So I decided to do it that way. And then shading that is, you know, the same kind of pattern that I did for Moonland, which is just the same as whatever the stars are on. So it's the same as the arms, or the same as the torso. And then, once I've finished all that, I do in fact remember to do the outer layer. So I do that, leave a few gaps just so I can add in the stars. And then the skin is pretty much done. Never mind, it's completely done. As always, with the skins remade, let's look at the old and new versions side by side. Some look more different to the originals than others, but I think it's fair to say they've all improved. Next time we'll remake the 3 skins afterwards, skip error code because I'm remaking that later, and also remake the skin just after it. If that sounds good to you, hit the subscribe button on your left and turn on notifications by clicking the bell. Don't forget to also hit the like button down below if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching and have a good night or day.